Another live stream. Hope you boys are doing well. Uh, and yeah, you can see the title of this live stream. This one will be basically story time. So get your popcorn ready. We'll be going into my experience getting coached in Belgrade and in London. And so, yeah, some people have actually asked me directly to talk about my coaching experience. And I figured, you know what? It makes sense because obviously I'm offering coaching services myself, and I think it would be very valuable for anybody watching who's potentially interested in linking up with me and completely transforming their dating lives, that, it could be valuable for you to get some insight into my own experience, right? Because I would never, push something that I don't see any benefit in. And so, as someone who's been coached and who's been down that road and has obviously benefited tremendously from it, it only makes sense to dive a bit deeper into what that experience looked like from top to bottom. So, yeah, here we are. And yeah, let's just get right into it. But before I get into it, if you don't know me, my name's Ian. I'm 28 years old and I live in the UK. I used to be an economic consultant in central London, and then I briefly worked as a data analyst for a sort of big American corporate company. And then I decided to leave my job and travel for a bit last year. And during that period, I started this channel, and I was inspired to show guys how to be confident when it comes to approaching women. And now I help guys transform their dating lives, and I help them, basically gain the courage and the confidence to approach women in public through the art of daytime cold approach. And I help them do this without needing them, to be inauthentic or to use routines or lines or to look max or to make $1 million extra a year. So yeah, that's a bit about me. So yeah, if you're interested, I think I've put something in the description, a link in the description if you want to book a call. But otherwise, let's get right into it. So, before we get into the actual period when I went to Serbia, Belgrade, it's worth noting that there was obviously a chain of events that led up to that decision. And so it's worth noting that I'm someone who did cold approach by themselves for a decent amount of time. So I came across it like anybody else online on YouTube, and I watched the content and I implemented it to the best of my ability. Right. So, and by the way, if you're watching, guys, feel free to drop it a like. That would be really appreciated in terms of outreach. Thank you already. There we go. Very responsive viewer. I like that. I like that. So, obviously, I came across Code Approach like anybody else, and I implemented it by myself because at the time I'd already been taking social risks. I'd already done improv. I was already putting myself out there in terms of making new friends. So, for example, a lot of my friends live in London, so I wanted to make more friends who were local to my town. And so I would go to these events or these meetup events where you could network and meet new people and make new friends. So I'd already taken some risks and I felt confident enough at that point to try cold approach by myself. And I managed to gain the courage to go outside one day and do my approach. And from that day onward, I went outside pretty much every weekend whenever I had the time. And I would go to central London or I would go to a nearby city here called Reading. And I would basically, maybe spend an hour or two just approaching as best as I could, right? Based on the information that I got from the channels that I was watching, like Christian Casanova or Ephraim, right? Paul University. And so I would use that content and then digest it, internalize it, and then apply it. And it worked, right? It worked to a degree and it worked to a decent level, right? So I got dates eventually, right? After gaining more confidence, after obviously the more reps you put in, the more likely you are to get the results. So I want to say I started in September in 2024, and then I got my first date in January 2025. So it took me, let's say, 4 months to get my first proper result, which is obviously dates. That's the reason why we're getting into this. And so I managed to get dates by myself, learning it by myself. Granted, through online content, right? It wasn't completely by myself because I was relying on other people's information, but I was able to get results, right? And I went on dates. I remember soon after getting my first date in January, there was a point where I went on 3 dates in 1 week, which was insane to me. And again, that was all by my own, let's say, um, by my own creation, right? By doing it, by relying on my own sort of internal self auditing process and getting out there and tweaking things. And I would record in my notes app every single approach as best as I could, because obviously I wouldn't remember every single interaction or how it went. But at that point I'd been going on dates. I'd been going on quite a few instant dates. I remember going on an instant date with a airline hostess who used to be a airline hostess in a private jet. I went on this instant date with this Dutch girl who was in London for a day, and we hung out for a bit. And so I was getting some results, right? Obviously, I was getting the positive reference experiences, which are the most important part. If you're doing this by yourself, even if you're not getting dates, as I wasn't getting dates in the first 4 months, if you're getting positive reference experiences, meaning the girls are encouraging you to keep on going, or they might not be interested, but they have positive reactions, then that is a good sign to keep on going. So I was certainly getting that, and I was getting above that, right? I was getting dates. I was actually going on dates with these women. So those beliefs were shattered. But the sticking point was the dates themselves, because those dates weren't really going anywhere. And I think a big part of that or a big reason for that was because I was quite rusty. I hadn't been on a date for, I mean, at that point, it would have been a year, right? So my last date was a hinge date in March 2024. And so obviously that, and then my next date after that was the first one I got through Cold Approach, which would have been about not a year, it was in January. So it was about, 9 months later. And I was very rusty, right? So you can imagine I was probably going into these dates really nervous in my head as a chronic logical overthinker, and I probably wasn't as relaxed as I should have been or needed to be in order to actually enjoy the dates. And of course, women can sense that nervous, restless energy. And so I think those early dates, sure, I could probably charge them to the game and sort of knock them off as throwaway dates just to get back into the mix. And, it's like the old boxer who's not been in the ring. He's going to be a little bit rusty. He might catch a few jabs, um, or catch a few left hooks unexpectedly because he's just not been conditioned well. All right. So that was understandable. But after I already had like two or three, I would have expected to start seeing progress. And when I say progress, I mean, making out with the girls on dates, or just going back to their place, or taking them back to my place, or just feeling like the dates would go past the first date, right? Getting second dates and third dates with the same girl. But I wasn't getting that. I wasn't getting that. And it happened time and time again. Now, eventually, I actually met someone who I dated here locally in my town, and I approached her in my town center, and she was one of those on girls who just opens up the moment you approach her because she's just immediately into you. And so she was really cool, and we obviously remained in contact. I eventually took her out on a date, and then I eventually took her out on a second date, and so that was the first time I'd taken a girl out on a second date, right? So you can imagine at this point I'd already taken out multiple girls, maybe 10 other girls at this point, or maybe not 10, maybe like 7. I was gonna say 6 or 7, but I know you annoying Zoomers are gonna be like 6, 7, haha. But yeah, I actually think it was like I've maybe gone on like 6 dates at that point. And so this girl was a girl that I actually took out on multiple dates, right? And obviously we had escalated things a bit. Like she came back to mine and we kissed, but we never went the full distance in terms of getting laid or whatever. But the point is, at some point, I I took a step back and thought, I like her, but I don't like her that much, right? Like, we were cool and she was fairly attractive, but I just didn't feel like this is what I wanted, and I'd already put in so much effort into my approaches leading up to that point, right? I'd already put in lots of reps to get better at the skill, but I still felt like something was missing, right? I still felt as if there was another level to reach. I didn't feel as confident in myself, despite the progress I'd made. Sure, I was way better than when I started, but there was still that uncertainty and that desire to be better. And so I remember, so this was around the time when I joined Ephraim's Pool University community on school, and it was a free community. And I joined that group, and I would drop my questions and my situation and ask guys for advice on how to proceed. And obviously, I put that into the group, and Ephraim basically said, "Look, if you're deciding to settle down with this one girl because you really like her and you really want to take things further with her, then by all means, shack up, do your thing. You deserve to enjoy yourself and have the cookie after all the reps you've put in as a solo player." And he said, you can do that. Or if you're being honest with yourself and you think you're only settling because you don't want to go through the process of learning the skill set properly or putting in more reps to get better, and you're only making that decision to settle down with this girl based off scarcity, right? Then he said, I would advise you to just cut ties and continue building the skill, continue getting better. And I took a step back and I said, you know what? I think it's the latter. I think I'm in the latter camp. I think this is a case of me just deciding to settle or potentially settle for this girl out of scarcity. Because at that point, I was on a 4-year dry streak. I hadn't been laid in 4 years. And obviously, the previous dates weren't going as far as I wanted them to. So this felt like the best opportunity to finally get the cookie. But I knew, deep down inside, I knew, there's something more than this, right? And so I cut things off with her. I ended things with her. And at that point is when, maybe like a week or two after that, is when Ephraim launched his private virtual one-to-one community. And so this was when I immediately signed up, did not hesitate because I wanted that one-to-one feedback because he was already giving, decent feedback or good feedback for free on the community, in the school community. So I wanted to get that virtual one-to-one intimate coaching because he would then, or I would get the opportunity to just give him all my details in terms of what I've been doing, how I feel during my approaches, what my approach looks like, all the self-limiting beliefs I had. And we were very like honest, right? And I remember when I signed up, we had our first call on a Sunday that week, and the call was scheduled to only be like 2 hours, but I think we ended up speaking for damn near 4 hours. So of course there was a lot to talk about, right? And that was let's say, the first time that I reached out for support, right? Proper support, tailored support, personalized to me and my unique situation. So that's what happened. So I joined his community, and so that was, I guess, the moment where I decided, okay, Ian, fair play, Ian. You've come far by yourself. You've done well. Like, pat yourself on the back. You've put in a lot of reps. A lot of people would have given up by this point. A lot of people don't even find this much success by themselves. So fair play. You've done well. But at the same time, let's drop our ego and let's adopt a student's mindset and recognize that there might be something that I don't know that is holding me back from finding full success. And why would I continue to bang my head against the wall when I can just reach out to somebody who's been there, done that, and somebody I trust, somebody I respect, and somebody who I resonate with? Why not just associate myself with them, get their feedback and support so that I can make this process go quicker? Because sure, I'm 28 years old. Like, it's not like I'm running out of time. It's not like I'm in my 40s and I'm thinking, oh, like time is going by and everything. But ultimately, time is of the essence. I have things to do. I had a life. I have places to be. I don't want to be continuously approaching every weekend and my efficiency is really low, and you know, I'm not getting the results I want, because at some point that plateau that I was experiencing, it could have just gotten worse, and then I could have just given up, and that would have been the worst, because all that hard work at the beginning would have been wasted. So I had that conversation with myself, and I said, all right, this is the moment. Let's go in for it, you know? And so I went in for it. And yeah, that was the first time I really reached out to for coaching. And of course, it was virtual at that point. And then guess what happened, right? So I joined the virtual program, right? And me and Ephraim are having these one-to-one calls every Sunday. And, you know, I'm essentially, giving him updates on my approaches, right? And he gave me specific focus areas to let's say address every week, because this is obviously based on the feedback that I gave him. So I think I just heard like a wasp. Oh my goodness, I hope that's not a wasp. Ah, and now the delivery guy's here. Okay, just give me a second, boys. All right, I'll be back in a second. I'll be back in a second. I swear. Package, baby. All right, give me a second, boys. Let me just. Lovely. Okay. It's funny because I always think like guys will just drop off the stream. They'll be like, "Screw this guy. He doesn't care about his viewership. He's willing to take his Amazon packages. He thinks they're more important than us." Oh, the numbers are dropping now. Well, for those of you who are still here, thank you for staying. I just wanted to get my drink. I bought a I bought a pack of Monsters. So let me just open this up real quick. Perfect. Okay, and scene. Let's go. Action. So where was I? So yeah, we were having back and forths, right? Me and Ephraim. And eventually, after iterating his feedback, right, I made progress. I started getting more dates, right? So after this rut that I experienced by myself, that all changed. And I was putting in more reps, but they were guided reps, intentional reps with his feedback in mind. And then eventually I met this girl in my town who I was attracted to, and we went on 2 dates, and then by the second date she came back to mine, and I broke my dry streak after 4 years. And this was only after I want to say 5 weeks, 5 weeks of virtual one-to-one coaching with Ephraim, right? So that was that was a pivotal moment, right? Because one, obviously the dry streak was broken, so I wasn't in that scarcity mindset anymore after that. But secondly, I realized, oh, like I probably could have experienced this way earlier if I just had somebody in my corner who knew what I needed to focus on, right? And so that was like a big moment where I thought, okay, imagine if I can get this much progress virtually. Imagine how much progress I can get when I'm in person. And so when Ephraim ended up in Europe and he said, look, I have open slots and I have, I'll be in Serbia, Belgrade. And obviously, he sort of, well, he knew that I was very proactive and serious about building this skill set properly. And he also knew that I very, heavily resonated with his content. And so we decided, you know what, it makes sense to do this in person, right? Even though I already got my quote unquote result, because think about it, I already got the result that everybody wants. Like, guys, let's be honest. Obviously, I talk a lot about the internal confidence that you gain from cold approach and how it seeps into every other area of your life, which I think is a massive understated benefit to cold approach. However, the main reason that we get into this is because we want girlfriends, we want to get laid, we want to have romantic experiences, And we want to avoid that scarcity mindset, right? That scarce dating mindset that most guys are in nowadays, even if they're dateable, right? And that was me. So I already got the result that I wanted, and I knew that I could probably get more of those results, after getting that, let's say, pivotal moment or that pivotal result. But a part of me still thought, no, 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 no. This is an opportunity of a lifetime. I can actually be around a guy who's done this properly, does it properly, been coached by somebody else who does it properly. So let me just go all in. And I have this mentality with things I do where, in my mind, I might as well fully send it. I might as well fully send it and just go all in. Why not? In my last stream, I talked about that Charles Bukowski poem, right? It's all about going all in. Go all in, right? Don't leave any stone unturned. Just go for it, right? And at the time, I had the money and I had the time, right? I had the holiday in my annual leave, so I thought, let's go for it. So I booked a flight, Airbnb, going to Belgrade, baby, and it was very quick. And yeah, I made that decision without hesitation because I knew it could be a life changing moment. And so obviously, like I said, I've also been coached before, right? So not coached in cold approach, but I play the drums, right? So I actually have my drum kit over there, and I played the drums in high school, and I was coached through the drums, and I know the value of coaching because I could have learned the drums by myself, right? I probably could have, watched some YouTube videos and bought some drum theory textbooks and just practiced and practiced and practiced. But having a drum teacher who was elite at the skill was a lot better for me because I just learnt quicker, right? He was able to see things in my technique that could be easily tweaked that I couldn't see myself because how could I see myself? I wasn't an expert. I wasn't trained. I was still a beginner. And so he would point out and be like, okay, Ian, look, you need to, you're hitting the hi-hat too fast, or, you need to position your foot with this pedal here. Or, he would like literally, sometimes he would even come around the drum kit and let's like sort of hold my hand and like show me how to do certain paradiddles or certain rhythmic patterns, right? And that would just sort of entrench the muscle memory of the drum pattern rather than just doing it myself. And so I knew the value of coaching, right? It's just the expedited way of gaining competency. It's a quicker way of being more competent because you're just surrounded by somebody who gets it and who's done it and can transmute it to you. So that's exactly why I pulled the trigger and I went for it. And so now I'll talk about the experience itself, right, in Belgrade, right? So obviously I booked the flight. We say 5-day immersion. So, I take the flight. I go to Gatwick early in the morning, dark, driving all the way from here to Gatwick, like a two. No, it wasn't Gatwick. It wasn't Gatwick. It was Luton. I went to Luton Airport. Not the nicest place, but yeah, I went to Luton Airport early in the morning. Made it on time. That African dad timing of we have to be at the airport 3 hours before the flight. So I got there early. And then actually it's funny because I remember Ephraim was busting my balls about that. He was like, dude, you're already at the airport at midnight and your flight's in like 6-7 hours. And I was like, yeah, look, man, it is what it is. So I get to the airport and then, yeah, get the flight to Belgrade. And to be fair, at that point, I wasn't too nervous or anything because I'd already done approaches and I already knew a lot about Ephraim and, his, let's say, legitimacy. It's not like I was going in to get coaching from somebody who I had no idea anything about. I'd already been consuming his content. So I was confident in the fact that I wasn't getting scammed or anything like that, obviously. But in terms of the nervousness about the whole immersion and the approaching itself, I wasn't nervous at that point, right? I was actually quite excited. I was very excited. In fact, I couldn't even wait. I couldn't wait to get on the plane there, right? Because I booked the tickets like 2 weeks earlier. So I couldn't wait to just finally get on the plane to Serbia. And so eventually I arrive at Serbia and yeah, I go to my Airbnb, I check in. And then I didn't get to meet Ephraim that day, so we had scheduled to start the coaching the day after. So I was by myself and I just explored the city. I went to some, different parts of the town square or the city square. I remember meeting this random Serbian guy who introduced me to Serbian rap music. So we spoke for a bit. And then I even did a few approaches myself just to warm up, because I'd already been doing approaches. So I thought, let me just see if I can make something happen. I guess that's the dog in me. That's just like I have to practice whenever I can. So yeah, I put a few approaches in, and then yeah, went back to my Airbnb and made sure I got some good rest for the pivotal first day, the day after. And so the day after, I meet Ephraim at the statue. I get there and I'm looking around. I'm thinking, where is he? And then I see him in his all black outfit, which is crazy because it was like boiling hot. But he's wearing like all black shirt, black shorts, and he's just there with his backpack. And he comes towards me. He's like, "Yo, what's up?" And we just sort of hug it out. And yeah, we're at the statue in that Republic Square. Shout out to the Republic Square. He knows about it. And yeah, we're just talking, catching up, and then he takes me to the Starbucks, where we just continue to catch up. Obviously, he asks me how I feel. I tell him, look, I wasn't nervous the day before. I told him this specifically. I said, dude, in the plane, the nerves were 0%. When I arrived, maybe it went up to like 30%. This morning, it went up to like 80%, and now it's at like 90%. So I was a little bit more nervous, definitely, once we actually met in person. And again, the reason why isn't necessarily because I was afraid of what would happen, but I think when you go in for an immersion or a coaching experience, even as somebody who's already done approaches, right? I knew in the back of my head that Ephraim would push me. Right? He would push me beyond my comfort zone because he already knew that I'd already done approaches. He already knew that I'd gotten laid from cold approach. So obviously I had some competency there. So I wasn't like a complete novice who had never done it before, right? So he, but even that, even knowing that, I actually knew that because he knew that, he would push me even further, even harder than he might have pushed other people. And so that was the nervous part because I thought to myself, what is he going to push me to do? Like he might push me to approach a group of 10, or he might push me to approach a group, like a mother and daughter. Because there were still scary approaches that I hadn't done before. And it's important to go through that process of trying harder and harder approaches because that's what builds the inner confidence over time. And so I knew he would do that. So that's why I was nervous, right? And I told him that without, pretending. I said, look, man, I am nervous, but I trust in you and I'm looking forward to it. So he was like, awesome. So we leave the cafe. He mics me up in broad daylight. People are looking at me thinking I'm a secret agent. And again, he asked me how I feel about that. And I'm like, yeah, it's cool. Like, I don't mind the spotlight. And so he puts the mic in. We do a mic check, make sure it's working. And then he goes, look, let's go. I want to see your approach. And we do my first approach. And I remember I did my first approach and I got blown out. So the girl didn't even stop for me. Or she was about to stop and then she just kind of walked around me. And this was such a pivotal moment because I do the approach. She goes around me. And then I'm standing there. And then I look to find Ephraim. And he's just there smiling. Right? He's just there smiling. And he kind of like gestures to come over. And I go over. And he literally just goes, nice, well done. And then we talk about the approach. And the reason I say that was so pivotal is because before that, I'd been doing dozens and hundreds of approaches by myself. And whenever I would get blown out by myself when I was in London or Reading or wherever I was, those blowouts would hurt. And sure, I got desensitized from that discomfort over time, but it was still fairly difficult to deal with by yourself because, you'd always feel a bit awkward. You'd feel that cringe, right? I've spoken about cringe before. But you'd feel cringe and you'd sort of be by yourself and maybe some people are looking, other people don't really care. Most people don't really care, but of course you're kind of in your head, right? And there's nobody else there to laugh about it with, or there's nobody else there to sort of, go back and forth with, or somebody to just give you like a shoulder to lean on, right? And this was the first time where I got blown out and I look and there's somebody there being like, "Well done," encouraging me, telling me it's fine. Like there's nothing wrong with this. Let's keep on going. Let's just keep it pushing. This is part of the process, and it was normalized for me, right? And so that was a big moment because then I was like, oh, I feel comfortable. I feel like somebody's gets it, right? It's like I've got my friend here who's willing to just be with me on this journey, whatever happens, whether it goes really well or whether it goes poorly or whatever. So that was a big relief, right? I think the best way to describe it is relief and reassurance that it's going to be okay, yeah, and that this is fine. So yeah, that was a big moment. And then yeah, I mean honestly, I won't go through the entire um, experience, but just to talk about a few highlights. So I remember that first day, Ephraim really pushed me in for the approaches where the girl seemed out of my league, and I remember I went in for this one approach, and there was this Canadian model. Actually, I have the infield on my channel if you want to watch it. And yeah, he pushed me in for that one. That's the kind of approach that I would have never done if I was by myself, unless I was feeling really, really confident. But he pushed me into that approach early on in the day. I think it would have been like my third approach of the day, and obviously the approach went well. I got her details. We even hugged it out at the end. And unfortunately, I didn't go on a date with her. And I think a big reason why is because she saw me approach somebody else. So it's funny because I approached her, we had our conversation, it went well. She hugged me, she parted ways, or we parted ways. And then let's say like 30 minutes later, Ephraim and I were going down the strip again, and he pointed somebody else out, and I said, "Cool, I'll go for that." And then as I'm walking towards the new girl, I'm about to do the approach, and then I see the Canadian girl in the same dress right there, and I bailed just in time. And it's funny because as I bailed, I could see Ephraim like catching up to me to tell me, "Dude, don't do it yet." It's like he'd kind of like jogged to be like, bro, don't approach her because the other girl's there." And I mean, obviously, I already clocked it, so I didn't need him to intervene. But I stopped, I turned around, and I saw him. He was obviously way closer than I expected, and we both just started laughing because we were like, "Bro, that's the cold approach gods. They got you in the nick of time." And so obviously at that point we were like, "Okay, let's let's maybe not approach for a bit, or let's just walk a bit further down and then do another approach." But it was funny because so we thought we were clear. We thought, okay, the coast is clear now. Phew, like we could wipe the sweat off our brow. Like we evaded the unfortunate situation of her seeing me approach someone else. But no, 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 no. I did not learn my lesson. And to be fair, like this was impossible to control because how can we control it, right? Like even that Belgrade main city center strip, it's fairly long, but it's like a pretty much just like a one street that goes from one end to another. So you're basically kind of going up and down when you're doing the approaches. So like you're bound to bump into people that you've approached. Like it just is, especially for doing this 5 days in a row. Um, and so obviously we weren't spending too much time on the streets because we're not trying to, be like um, super intense day gamers who just spend 9 hours parading the streets. Like no, we'd probably approach for like 3 hours at most, because we didn't need that much time to approach. Right, it was like condensed action in a condensed period of time. So, so yeah, so we thought we were off the hook, but then it's funny. What ended up happening was I approached another girl that same day, but way later on, and what do you know? We review the footage of that approach, right? Like the day after, and we see the Canadian girl walking past me as I'm chatting up this German girl, and I was actually about to go on a date with that German girl. So you could obviously the Canadian girl probably saw me like chatting her up and having a nice back and forth, and so I think that's the reason why we didn't end up going on a date, which was a shame because she was really really attractive and we had a good vibe. And yeah, it is what it is. But obviously I was there to learn the skill set, right? So another point to make before I continue is I went into the immersion thinking I don't need to get quote unquote laid or go on multiple dates. I just want to learn the technique because I was thinking long term. I was thinking, look, I'm just here to absorb all the high level knowledge from Ephraim, right? That's all I care about. right? And I will just do what he says. I will take his advice. I will listen to him, and I will go ahead. And that's what I did. That was my main focus. And anything else other than that would have been a bonus. So that was my mentality. So that was, yeah, that was day one. And then, after that, I think day two, I took it up a notch. So he pushed me into more difficult approaches. So he asked me to go and approach groups of two, groups of three. And so I did that. And then eventually, out of nowhere, me and him are walking at the end of the strip. And then he sees a group of three, and I see them too. And they're all really good looking. And I think, I sort of look at him, and he looks at me, and he goes, "Hey, you might as well go in for that, mate." And I go, "Okay." And then I ask him, "How many do you think there are?" And he goes, "I think there's three." And then as I'm thinking about whether or not I'll go in for it, he then goes, "Wait a minute, I think there's five of them." And then, long and behold, we realize that it's a group of five girls, right? And I'm like, I don't know about that. Like, I didn't say that out loud, but in my head, I was like, this is a tough one. Five girls at once. And this is also at the end of the strip where there are restaurants on both sides. And then it's also right before the entrance of this really big mall. So it's super busy. Like, there's a lot of people there. You can actually see the approach on Ephraim's channel. If you go to Poole University, you can see the approach, right? And it's a fairly busy area. So the pressure's there. The social pressure is there. And bearing in mind, yeah, I'd already done approaches prior to that moment. So I was warmed up, but I was still bricking it, right? But then he was like, he kind of did that thing that he does where he went, "All right, man, it's up to you." All right. So he didn't really like push me, but I think he kind of got under my skin to try and, like, that masculine um like competition where it's like, I mean, you don't have to if you don't want to, but that's basically him kind of suggesting, like, if you don't do it, then you're kind of chickening out, right? And I think Ephraim's a great coach because he knew how to, like, motivate me. So as soon as he said that, I was like, "Nah, I'm going in." And I literally, in that moment, I just said, "I'm going in. I'm not gonna think twice." So I turn my ass around. I go. I get in front of them. It was actually quite difficult to stop them because it was in a really awkward place. And I stop them, and I'm standing there, and I'm looking at five beautiful girls, and I'm thinking, what the hell do I say? And I just say whatever. I say, "Hey, you guys look amazing. I walked past you, blah blah blah." And they laugh. They open up. We have a brief, maybe 3 minute conversation. I remember I said something really naughty, really naughty at the end of the interaction. If you want to go see it, go watch it on Ephraim's channel. But yeah, it was really funny. And then yeah, that was it. And after that approach, I was on cloud nine. Honestly, it was the euphoria, the ecstasy in my body was insane. It felt like I took 10 cans of Monster at once. Because you have to imagine that, like, it's one thing for me to describe this to you guys, but you try go outside and approach five girls in a busy part of London. Just try it, please. When you do that, and then it goes okay, and then it goes well, the feeling you have after overcoming that fear is so intense that once you've done it, your senses are completely heightened. I hadn't felt that much intense emotion and euphoria since my first ever approach that I ever did way back on September 14th, 2024. Right. So clearly, the reason why I felt so much energy, and why I had such a high frequency was because that was the scariest approach I'd ever done at that point. And I remember, like, afterwards, Ephraim was like, "Yo, what the hell? Like, how did you do that? Dude, like, it was three. We thought it was three, but it was five." And I'm like hugging him out, and he's dapping me up, and he's gassing me up. And I'm like, "Bro, I don't know how I did it. I just didn't want to look like a pussy." And he asked me how it went, and I'm just like trying to recall it because I'm still kind of in a daze. And it was intense. Like, it was actually quite intense. Like, I felt that adrenaline. Yeah. And it's funny because people might look at that and go, "Dude, all of this for approaching a girl?" But, like, bro, in public, like, try it. It's not easy, right? It's not easy. And you have to understand where I've come from. Like, I used to be a socially anxious guy. I didn't spend much time outside for a period after my breakup in 2020, after COVID. I wasn't spending as much time outside with friends. I was fairly insecure. I was obviously my dating life was terrible, barely had any options. So for me to do something as bold and audacious as this was way beyond my realm of expectations around my capabilities. So I was like, I mean, that approach was just me smashing like a self-limiting belief, just absolutely devouring it. So that was why it was an amazing moment, one that will live with me forever. And I think what made it better was just, having Ephraim smile and like just be so proud and be so gassed. Like that was really cool. That was really cool. So I think he made that equally special. But yeah, that was that. And then yeah, that was pretty much day one and day two. And then day one and day two went well. And then day three was the hardest day. Kept getting blown out. Didn't barely got any details. Was struggling to get the girls to stop. And my technique was okay based on what Ephraim told me. It was just that my energy was off and I was getting in my head. And if you're doing an immersion, especially a multi-day immersion, that's maybe more than 3 days or 4 days. But if you're doing that kind of immersion, then yeah, you're likely to have a either an entire day or half a day where things aren't going your way, right? And so I experienced that, and he was just there to take me through it. We were meant to be approaching outside, but then it was super super hot, and so we decided to go to a big mall where it was air conditioned. And yeah, I went into the mall, and it just didn't get any better. I wasn't able to stop the girls, and yeah, I was very frustrated and getting in my head thinking, oh, like maybe I'm not about it. Maybe I've lost the source. Maybe I'm ugly. Maybe I'm not attractive enough. And we just had a nice back and forth, and he just reassured me. And yeah, he really just held my hand in that process, which was really cool and really needed. And then eventually you know, mustered up the confidence and courage to try again towards the end of the day, and things improved. And I ended up approaching a group of two Brazilian girls. I still remember all of this, by the way. And so I ended up approaching a group of two Brazilian girls, and then he joined in, and we had this fun two-set interaction, and I felt much better, right? So, yeah, day three was a tough day, the toughest day of approaching I've ever done, but it was needed. And it's funny because when I look back at the 5 day experience, I think day three was hands down the most important day, because it's all nice and dandy when things are going well, but the true test of character for anybody learning the skill set, including the guys that I'm going to be coaching, the true test of character is how you handle the adversity, because the adversity is the skill in a sense. Getting past that adversity and iterating where you can, or changing aspects of your approach where you can after getting blown out or after getting undesirable results, is how you learn the skill set. Because if everybody just turned up on an immersion and had a great result with the first approach, well then that basically defeats the purpose. And if that was the case, anybody would do it. Anybody would just rock up, right? So, I had the awareness and the mentality to understand that these difficult moments are where the skill is built. And so I should just embrace them, not take them too seriously. Obviously, lean on my supportive brother or coach or network when I can, just to keep my spirits up. And most importantly, not to lose enthusiasm. Because once you lose enthusiasm, that's when it sort of seeps into the way you approach, into your energy, and that will just derail you even further. And so that's what I did. And so day four, I bounced back. Day four was an improvement. Day five was an improvement. Day five, I eventually got a instant date with this really cute Russian Serbian girl. Again, that's on my channel. You can see that approach. And yeah, I ended the immersion on a high, and it was really, really important and life changing. And I learned so much. My approach improved dramatically. I was bolder. I was quicker to act, quicker to pull the trigger. And, you know, I just, I gained so much perspective on where my sticking points were, especially with my conversations, right? When it came to how I would close, I was using a lot of tepid, watered down language, which I wasn't aware of until I listened back to it. And even when I listened back to it, I wasn't even aware of it until Ephraim pointed it out. And then I realized, yeah, why am I saying it like that? I don't normally say that when I'm making plans with friends. So why am I saying that when I'm in front of the girl, right? And it didn't make sense. And so I made those changes, I made those tweaks, and eventually I felt more confident in my approaches. And yeah, and then of course I just another sort of brief highlight is I met Joseph. So Joseph is another guy who has a channel and he approaches as well. And he he was there in Belgrade with Ephraim. And so it was so cool to hang out with them in the evening. We would normally get dinner and just talk about life. And I would see Joseph just randomly be like, just hold on a minute, boys. I'm going to go approach that girl because she looks really, really good. And he would just get up his seat, straight into set. And it was so effortless, so seamless. At that point, I was somebody who kind of felt like I needed to warm up before I got into my true, confident, high frequency state, which is what I felt I needed to get to have the best interactions. But he would just off the rip just get off his seat, approach, and so smooth. And that's not to say that every approach that he did is smooth or he does is smooth, but I mean that was just really cool to see. And one of the reasons why that was, I think, very important as well, aside from just getting the coaching, was because it exposed me to one, what the skill set looks like when somebody's really good at it, but two, just the normalization of this. Because and now we can talk about the main benefits, right? So I'll transition and segue into what the main benefits were from getting coaching, right? And so the first one is that normalization process, meaning before I got coached, obviously I resonated with the message of code approach through Ephraim, through Christian. Obviously, I wanted to, and obviously, I believed in the power of the skill set. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. But it was still a very lonely journey because I didn't have anybody else to go out with to wing. I would go out by myself. I didn't have anybody to lean on, nobody to share my wins with or share my losses with, or nobody to just talk about code approach with, right? And I didn't have that person until I joined the communities that I mentioned earlier. But to be there in person and to see two guys do it properly and do it unashamedly and unapologetically, and then we as if it was normal, right? That was really important because now it was like, oh, this is just a normal thing. It's totally cool if you're just having dinner and then you see a girl and think, oh yeah, she's cute. Let me just go say hi. And then if he gets blown out, then he comes back smiling. We're laughing about it, and then we just continue, right? Imagine if I was with my friends, right? My friends from back home here, right? If I was sat at dinner and then I thought, boys, we all just saw that smoke show walk past, right? And they'd all go, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'd go, I'm thinking about approaching her. There's a high chance that they might go, bro, come on, man. Nah, 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 nah. Don't do that. Like, what if she rejects you? And they'll just be negative about it. And that's through no fault of their own because that's just the paradigm that they live in, right? They're used to the dating apps. They're used to having to get drunk at the nightclub or at the bar in order to approach. But I'm the odd one out. I'm the black sheep. And so I wouldn't have found people, sorry, before Belgrade, I didn't have that group of guys, of like-minded guys to just share those experiences with. So when I met Joseph and I saw him do it, I was like, oh, this is so cool. And so again, yeah, that was really important uh, to normalize it, because what normalization did for me was it removed all the doubts or the shame that society will try and place on you when it comes to this sort of stuff. Because ultimately, what are we doing here? We're just expressing our desires. We're expressing our true, authentic male desires, right? Male desires. Okay, that does that sound kind of pause? That might need a pause. But you know what I mean, right? Like we're expressing our desires authentically in a respectful way. So, but of course, like in society, code approaches are normal. So it can feel like you're the odd one out, which it goes against that inner need for validation and feeling part of the in group, feeling part of the tribe, which is like a natural desire because we're social animals. But the real win here is you leave that normal mass tribe of society and you find your sort of niche group of warriors, your niche group of pirates, of freedom architects, of guys who are just going against the grain. And once you find them, and it doesn't have to be dozens of people or hundreds of people. It just needs to be two guys. In Belgrade, it was just Ephraim and Joseph, right? And so that was really cool. So that was the first benefit, and then the second benefit that I got from the immersion was rapid action. And this is something that, again, having a coach is great because Ephraim would just push me into approaches. All right, go in for that one, blowout, cool. 5 seconds later, go in for that one. And even when we would walk past the girl, because the way that we do it is, you're walking, you walk past the girl, and then you turn around and you walk up and you approach her, sort of from the side, and then try and stand in front. So we would do that really quickly. Like he would push me to pull the trigger immediately. And before the coaching, I was somebody who would take their time. I would do an approach and then take my time to process that last approach. And as I'm trying to process it, there's plenty of girls who are walking past me who I want to approach, but it's almost as if I needed the time to recover, which is fine as a beginner, right? As a beginner, that's expected, right? You're not expected to just immediately go in back to back to back. But being around Ephraim and him pushing me in quickly, it just conditioned me to act quicker, which was great because I didn't lose opportunities anymore, right? I was able to just, go in for the next one and the next one and do it again unapologetically, right? Because I think a big reason why I thought it was, or a big reason why I struggled to pull the trigger very quickly in terms of how long it took me to approach in between each approach was because I thought the girls who I just approached might see me, and then two, I just thought that it would be a bit too much. I don't know why. I just thought it was weird. I don't know why. It's weird, but I think a part of it's also because I I would take a long time to even get up to the girl sometimes, like, and everyone would just push me to jog a little bit or to speed walk. And of course, I used to watch his infields, and I'll see him speed walking, and I'll think that's a bit like that looks a bit weird. But then he told me, look, regardless of whether or not it looks weird, at the end of the day, when that girl's on the date with you, giggling, and then she's back at your place begging you, are you going to be caring? Will you care about how weird the approach looked on camera? No, no. And she won't either. She'll be like, oh, I'm so happy you approached me. So you have to just put those fears, insecurities at the back of your mind and just go in, right? And so that's what he taught me, and that's what allowed me to take rapid action, which of course is a trait and a skill that I still to this day use in my approach, which is why I'm able to get better results than anybody else, right? Because I pull the trigger. I don't miss opportunities as much as I used to. And then, like I said, I sort of alluded to the next point previously in the previous section of this live stream, but another benefit of the coaching was just having a shoulder to lean on, having somebody to confide in when I was feeling low, because that just kept my spirits up and allowed me to remain somewhat enthusiastic or optimistic despite the sort of lower, or despite the tough situation in front of me. So that was really big as well. And then, sort of linked to that same point on having someone to lean on is having somebody to open up to. So, I think it was on day 3, Ephraim and I, before we started the coaching, we'd gone to Starbucks and we reviewed the first 2 days of footage. And afterwards, we sort of got into a deeper discussion about my language in the approaches, where that comes from. Why am I being tepid? Am I rejecting myself before the girls rejected me? Why am I afraid to be direct in certain parts of the conversation? Why am I being agreeable? And we just we got into a deeper discussion about, my experiences getting rejected in high school and my upbringing, and we just got into a really deep conversation, and that was a really big moment as well, because I was finally able to open up to somebody about my experiences, with the feminine, and how that affected my confidence growing up, and how it made me more insecure about my looks, and how I probably still carry a bit of that in the approaches. And he was just there to listen, and he, accepted everything I had to say. He wasn't judging me, obviously. He was like, I totally get that. And we just kind of had this like really cool heart to heart, which was super cool. Um, and I think that was just as important because this whole process, it's not just about the technique, right? Because the technique is just the method to get you in front of the girl and to have the conversations. But at the end of the day, you're bringing your personality into this. You're bringing yourself into this, which includes how you feel about yourself, your self-worth. And if that's not on point, if that's not at a decent level, then it's going to sabotage you in sneaky ways. And so therefore you have to address those issues at some level. Now, I'm not saying we had an entire therapy session, but what we did do was talk about this stuff, right? And it gave me more license to be free. And it just gave me more clarity on why I'm behaving the way I behave. And so once I knew that, I could then, sorry, I'm a little bit gassy. Once I knew that, I could then make adjustments. And so that was really important. Again, another really big benefit of having a coach, because before that, who would I have spoken to about this stuff with, right? So sure, I have my friends, but I never opened up about my dating troubles as much as I did with Ephraim, because I just felt uncomfortable doing that with other friends, right? Um, and so to do that with him was really pivotal as well. And then I think the last main benefit for the coaching in Belgrade was just seeing yourself and hearing yourself on camera changes everything. Because as somebody who did it solo, I would, like I said, I would jot down notes on my notes app after approaches just to put some details on how I felt the approach went, why I think it went the way it did, if it was positive or negative. And I would review that, right? But I never recorded myself, which was a big mistake, by the way. If anybody's out there approaching by themselves, please record yourself, right? You don't have to get coaching from me if you don't want to get coaching from me. But just for your own benefit, record your approaches, please. Because as I found out the hard way, how I thought I sounded wasn't actually how I sounded. So I thought I sounded confident. I thought I sounded assured. But in reality, my language was tepid. I was giving a lot of filler language, like maybes, potentially we could do this, maybe, yeah, like this, maybe like if you feel like it. There was no directness in many parts of the interaction, but I didn't notice that until I listened to it back or listened back to it. And then in terms of the actual footage of the approach, right? So seeing myself walk up to the girl, I think a good reason why that was valuable is because I'll give two reasons. So the first one is on one of my first approaches when I got filmed, I didn't know that I wasn't smiling as much. And so Ephraim pointed out that I wasn't smiling. And I thought I was smiling, but then he showed me the footage, and then I saw that I initially smiled, but then my sort of smile waned because I was very nervous, right? And of course, in the moment, aside from seeing the footage, I wouldn't have known that because I was sort of too much in my head, right? But that was like a sort of involuntary reaction that my face was doing, because obviously when you're nervous, sometimes your subconscious or your nervous system sort of just takes over, and you do things that you don't even notice, like you lose your smile, or maybe you're sweating a little bit, or maybe you're twitching a little bit. I mean, I don't know, it's different for everybody depending on how nervous you are and how nervousness manifests itself in your body language as an individual. But I didn't know that until I saw it on camera. And so again, the footage allowed me to point out what was going on that I wasn't aware of. Again, which is important because you don't know what you don't know. So if I didn't get coached, I would have just been making the same mistakes. Imagine, think about this, right? I had done about 500 approaches by myself before I got coaching. Think about this, bro. Like, of all those approaches, think about how many of those approaches didn't go well because I wasn't smiling as much as I thought I was. And if I just sorted that out early on by having somebody else audit me on film, then I would have saved myself a lot of hassle. Who knows how many more dates I would have been on, right? Same goes for the language. When he pointed out the language, I went, oh my days, do you know how many times I probably had conversations where I did a good approach at the start, but then I messed it up at the end because of my tepid, weak close. And here's another thing, right? I think a lot of guys who do this solo, they spend so much time thinking about the open that they neglect the close. And the close is actually just as important, right? And so, there has to be congruency between the open, so the confidence and the conviction you come in with the open, as well as the end, as well as the close, because the girl's thinking, hold on, this guy approached me with so much confidence, which I rate and I really appreciate, and it's turning me on. And then we're having a nice conversation. But then as the conversation's going on, he's using tepid language. And then when it comes to closing, he's very unsure of himself, and he doesn't sound like he really believes that he can take me out on a date. And she's not thinking this consciously. This is all happening subconsciously because they can sense it with your language, your actual like spoken language, as well as your body language or your pace of speech or your tone. Even something as subtle as intonation between the beginning and the end of a sentence. Like, think about this. There's a difference between saying, I want to take you out for drinks later tonight versus, I want to take you out for drinks later tonight, right? There's a difference in how you say that, right? She can notice it, but the funny thing is, you don't even notice you're saying it with that high pitch until you hear it back, right? And so please, boys, fellas, right? My boys, my guys, please, regardless of whether you get coaching or not, please, at the very least, record yourself. Record yourself, yeah? And really, like, go through your audio with a fine comb and really listen, because there's a lot of the devil's in the details. You can really you can see the nervousness or the lack of self-worth in some of those audios. So that was a big benefit. And so yeah, that was the Belgrade experience. So obviously Belgrade was great. It was funny because I had that great 5-day experience, learnt a lot, and then on my way back to London, we had a really heavy night out the final night there. So me and Ephraim, we went out to celebrate, got drinks at our favorite bar. Shout out to that bar, that pit stop bar in Skedalia. He knows what I'm talking about if he's watching, but yeah, we had a really good time out there, and then we met these other cool guys, and we all bought rounds for each other, and we got free drinks, and we just had a hell of a great night. And of course, I got fairly like wasted, pretty heavy night, the heaviest I've had in a while, but it was worth it because we had such a good time. And yeah, the morning after I was pretty hungover. It's sort of a miracle I made my flight, but I eventually made my flight. And then because I was a little bit late, I was one of the last people to board the plane. And so I get onto the plane and I can obviously see whereabouts my seat is. Most people are sat down. So I look at my ticket, I go, okay, there we go. And then I see my seat, and I see right next to me on the seat is this beautiful girl. And I'm like, oh, here we go. I'm like, okay. I'm thinking in my head, okay, how do I play this? Because one, I'm hungover as shit. So I'm not even in the best frame of mind. I don't even think I ate breakfast yet. So I probably just needed to sleep. But at the same time, she was so attractive. I was like, I'm gonna subtly weave my way into a conversation, right? Because obviously we're stuck on a plane for 2.5 hours. So I don't want to be like, hey, I just saw you earlier and you look amazing. That would obviously be a very socially uncalibrated thing to do, right? I want to give her a way out. So I didn't even compliment her. I just asked her, like, actually, what did I say? I think I said, I think I just asked her where she's from. Yeah, I just said, hey, where are you from? And that was it, right? And I wanted to see if she would engage, if she would be really up to talking. And then she immediately was like, oh yeah, like I'm from here and I've just spent time here. And she just started talking. And I was like, yeah, I came here to see my friend. And then we literally spoke the entire plane ride. Of course, I was a bit flirty at moments to make sure that she understood that I wasn't just here to be like a friendly plane passenger, acquaintance. I was here to, kind of subtly shoot my shot, and she got that. There was a point where we were listening to music together, and we were listening to like romantic music, and I was like making sort of jokes about that. And then eventually I told her, look, because she was actually going to Scotland, so she goes to uni in Scotland. So I was like, hey, if you know, since you're still gonna be in London until you're trained to Scotland, once we arrive, we might as well get some lunch, right? Because I'm starving, and I'll be taking a train back to, you know, back to my town through London, so we might as well just get something to eat. And she was like, yeah, I would love that. So yeah, after the flight, we hung out pretty much for the next 2 3 hours, got lunch, and then eventually parted ways. And obviously, she lives in Scotland, and it's funny because we actually spoke a few months ago. Um, and yeah, she was just telling me that she's hoping to get a job in London at some point, because she does law. So once she's finished her degree, she wants to move to London. So yeah, I think who knows if I'll ever see her again, but it sounded like she was open to actually potentially going on a date one day. But again, I'm in such an abundant position right now. Of course, I'm also seeing somebody in London already, although it's a non-exclusive relationship, so I can date other people. But right now, I'm pretty happy with what I have at the moment. But yeah, just a quick story that, you know, as soon as the immersion finished, I was right back into the fold, which is important because one important aspect of approaching after an immersion is you need to approach as soon as possible when you get back home, because the immersion is transformative. You gain skill and you gain competency, and that does stick with you. But in order to solidify it, you must approach as soon as possible. Otherwise, you're going to lose that momentum. And so, obviously, Ephraim reiterated that to me. And of course, I was going to do that anyway because I knew how this skill set goes. But there have been people in the past who do an immersion and then they don't really approach immediately, and that can go against them, right? They lose that momentum, which is really important. So yeah, of course, I did that approach in the plane, and then of course after that, I went to my town. I went to a nearby town center, Reading, and did approaches there. Um, and yeah, I I think I did that first session maybe 4 days after the immersion. And yeah, obviously immediately felt way better, way more competent, way more confident in my approaches, and I basically reenacted the quality of the approaches that I'd learnt in Belgrade. So I didn't lose that, let's say, technical ability, right? Because I'd done it so soon after, rather than waiting and letting it die down. So that was big. That was big. And then, of course, to wrap things up, obviously, that was in the end of my coaching experience. So Ephraim, he flew out to London about a month after that. And yeah, we spent 2 days, so just one weekend together approaching. And yeah, again, it was just extra coaching basically. But of course, it was on home soil. So it wasn't Belgrade anymore. It was the tough, busy streets of London. And yeah, that was again more of the same, just working on those sticking points that we'd identified in Belgrade. Um, and yeah, just reinforcing those technical aspects, and then just going a step further, right? Just trying to level up even more, being more disagreeable with the girls when I'm having the conversations, not being as agreeable, right? Or um, you know, being bolder, so being louder, for example. So he noticed that obviously like Belgrade isn't as busy as London. So in Belgrade you didn't necessarily have to be so loud. Whereas in London, if you're on Tottenham Court Road, it's a very busy area, lots of people, buses, sometimes construction. So you need to be louder. Yeah, you need to be louder with your excuse me when you're opening. So he noticed that my volume wasn't loud enough, so he told me, look, be louder. And so obviously I implemented that feedback. And yeah, I think I just continued to break more self-limiting beliefs. And I think one of the biggest ones was, which he caught on camera, was, you know, I approached this girl and it went well. We had a conversation and I set up a date for that evening, which I had never done before. And honestly, I didn't think that was possible. So before that, I always thought I have to get the number and then maybe set something up on text, or even if I set up the date there and then, I still have to set it up for a day and later or a week later. And a big reason why is because I thought that the girl would think that it would be needy for me to like set the date up in the moment. But of course, he just told me, no, 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 like that's not the case. Like that's not needy. If anything, that's just bold. That's somebody who's being extra direct and extra audacious and believes so much in themselves that they assume that the girl will want to see them that day, that evening. And so, what do you know? I'm talking with her, and I realize that she has time in the evening. She's free that evening. And so I just go all in and I say, look, I want to take you out tonight. And she says, tonight? And I go, yeah. And she goes, oh, cool, yeah. I'm free. Let's do it. And then I, get her details. We set something up. And then I see her later that night after eating dinner with Ephraim. So, yeah, we had a good time. So that was like a big moment again, right? Because I finally set up a date in the moment for that day, which I didn't think was possible. So yeah, that shifted my perspective entirely. And of course, that was great because I did the exact same thing when I went to Thailand, when I had that amazing experience with that Finnish girl. I met her outside, daytime approached her, nice conversation. I find out she's leaving in a few days, and I'm like, "What are you doing tonight?" And she's like, "Well, I'm seeing a friend for dinner, but other than that, nothing else." And I go, "Okay, cool. Well, after dinner, I want to see you." And then she says, "Yeah." And we go on the date, and we have a great night, an absolute wonderful night. Shout out to her. But yeah. So obviously, like coaching, right? So that's the entire experience. Um, that was obviously, from Belgrade to London to now. And yeah, I mean, just to close out the stream, I mean, that's why, I got coaching. That's what happened. And when I look back, you can just see the turning points. You can see all those pivotal moments. And as somebody who's always been a sort of solo player or like a lone wolf kind of guy, I mean, I've not been like that all the time, to be fair. Like, I've always seen the value in teamwork and community. I'm not going to sit here and pretend as if I've always been a Sigma grind set lone wolf guy. But, certainly with Code Approach, I wanted to try it myself. I wanted to see if I could do it myself. Um, and so, but then I realized, I have the money to invest, right? Obviously, I didn't have enough money to um, invest too much at a certain point, but then I had enough, over time. And then I realized, well, I have enough, and this is worth investing because this investment isn't just for the 5 days. Like I didn't want to look at it as I'm investing in 5 days of coaching. To me, I'm investing in a lifetime of confidence. And I really see the skill as that kind of activity. I really see the skill as something that has that much power to transform you in terms of how you view yourself, how you view the world, how you view your own ability, and how you increase your confidence, your social confidence, which is a very strong and valuable currency in a modern day where people are even afraid to hold eye contact with the fucking barista. You know what I mean? Like people are afraid to have conversations in public. People are afraid to be seen. People are very afraid to be seen. And now if you hang out with me, like bro, like I don't mind being seen. I don't mind having the spotlight. I can take it. Pause. I can take it. So I'm good. So it's yeah, it's a very valuable opportunity if you can get coached by somebody who's been there, done that, and been in your shoes, and who can resonate with you and relate to you. Then yeah, it just expedites the process, and you either pay with money or you pay with time. And so you can just see my journey. I mean, it's one of those exponential growth curves. It's like this by myself. I make progress. I make progress by myself, and then I get coaching. Ooh, and then it just goes like that. Is it a coincidence? Of course not, right? It's not. So yeah, that's it, boys. That was my experience being coached in Belgrade and in London. And so obviously, I'll just plug myself at the end of the stream. So if you liked what you heard, if you're tired of sitting on the sidelines and you resonate with my message and you think that you would be the right kind of fit to embark on this journey to transform your dating life in the way that I've transformed it, then there's a link in the description You can book a call with me one to one. No pressure. It's just an opportunity for the two of us to have a conversation. I can see where you're at and determine if we're a good fit. And then we can sort of plan out the next steps to see what I could offer you in terms of, getting ahead and making significant changes. And even if we don't work together, even if I decide, we're not a good fit, then I'll still give you value, because I've been there. I've been in your shoes, my guy. I've been in your shoes. I've been down that road as I've just laid out in detail. And either way, I'll be rooting for you because I respect anybody who's willing to put themselves out there, regardless of whether or not they get coached or regardless of whether they decide to do this solo. And you can still get results doing it solo, but you'll just save yourself a lot of time and effort if you get coached. And I'm looking for guys who are busy professionals, guys who've got something about them like I do. And yeah, I'll be looking forward to chatting to some of you. But otherwise, I hope you found that valuable. And yeah, have a good rest of your day. I will be streaming every single day in February, since February is my birthday month. So starting tomorrow, I believe starting tomorrow, right? Yeah, I think the first day of Feb is tomorrow. I'm not sure, to be honest, but whenever the first day of Feb is, I'll be streaming every single day. So yeah, if you want to leave a specific topic, maybe something that you've been struggling with, if you're approaching already, just drop a comment in the video, and I'll make a whole topic about it. Otherwise, I'll just come up with my own topics that I think are relevant to helping you guys approach better. And so I will actually guide a lot of the content next month, or the live streams next month, towards actionable, practical advice based on my experiences and based on my beliefs in terms of what I think can help you get to where you want to get to. So let's end it on that note. Enjoy your day. I'm going to finish this monster and get on with my day. So take care, fellas. Peace out.